Hey YouTube, this is Prince from Desi Programmer, and just as the title suggests, in this video we are going to talk about parsing JSON in Flutter. Now JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, is a syntax for storing and exchanging data. In simple words, I can say that JSON is such a file format which can be easily read and interpreted by the machine, that's a computer, as well as can be understood by humans easily. Now, JSON is used a lot nowadays whenever you are exchanging data with the server, either through a browser or through an application. Most of the time, the response is in JSON, which is why we need to understand how we can work with JSON. In other circumstances too, when we are storing some data, it's better to store it in a JSON than just storing the data in some simple text file, because JSON helps us to read the data easily, even by a human or by a computer. So let's just get started in this video and let's see how we can work with JSON. So here I have a simple app up and running with some theme and a background of gray with some text that's in white that says JSON. Now in the same directory that's at the root level, I have this folder. I call it as asset and it has a file data.json. I think this is something that you can do easily. Now to use this file, we have to go to pubspec.yaml, and here you will see we have the assets, then just uncomment it, and then you have to add a task, and then we have to say that we are going to use everything inside the asset folder, which is just data.json right now. Now if this gives us an exit code of 0, which means everything is good and we can move forward. Now, to get this JSON data, we need a future builder. You can use a future builder outside as a function or even in your scaffold. So all that we have to do is that in the body, I'm saying that this is going to be a future builder, and the future builder will have its own property. Obviously, the first one will be a future, then we need a builder. Now, what is a future? See, there can be two ways using which you can get some JSON data, either from a server that's getting the data through a network that's getting the data online, and the second way is from an asset. Right now, I'm not getting the data online, so I can use the asset. But if you want to use the data online, even then the process will be the same. The only difference is that right now, when I'm going to use a default asset bundle, you will have to get the data online using HTTP GET library. So I will saying we am getting the default asset bundle dot of this context, and I have to load a string, and thus a string which is the address, that is asset slash data dot json. Now here I will have my file being read. Now in the builder we need to pass two things. The first one is the context, and second one is an snapshot. So it can be any variable. I'm going to name it as snapshot2, and this builder function should return a visit. So let's say I'm returning a center. All that I have to do is to change this to semicolon. Now, okay, it says an error, asset slash data dot json can't be loaded. And why is that so? So you will have to restart the application, only then we can do this. Let's do that. And sometimes this error persists. Even though you restart the application, it stays. In that case, all that you have to do is to clean the application. That's go to use command shift P, use flutter clean, and then rebuild the app. Then it will go for sure. Anyway, right now, let's see if it goes or not. Well, after restarting the application, you can see that it's up and running. Everything is good. Now, in this builder, before returning a widget, we have to get the data from our JSON. For that, we say on any variable, let's say my data, and this will help me to get the data. Now, first of all, to get the data, we will use this asynchronous snapshot, and then we say snapshot dot data dot toString. Now this will give us the data. Now since this data is JSON, we have to decode it. So I'm saying JSON dot decode. Now first of all, I have to import the JSON. So click on JSON, it will auto import the library. Then I'm saying decode, and the data that we get is snapshot dot data dot toString. That's it. Now that data is here, which is in my data. We get an exception because there's no data here, which is an exception. So now let's insert some data in JSON. And this video is all about understanding JSON data and how you can use that in Dart at a very basic level, because if the basics are clear, then you won't be complaining about understanding complex JSON data, because that's all about understanding the basic. Now JSON data can either be an object or an array of object. Now although we call this as a map, in JSON it's just an object. So let's say that our JSON contains a very simple object which says name, and the name is Desi programmer. Let's save it, and here we don't need this comma. Let's just save it, and now this error should go. But if you want this data, we want this data to be displayed over here. So I will say my data. Now here is the thing that you have to understand. This is a JSON object, but when this comes to this variable my data in Flutter, which is dot, it becomes a map with where this is the key and this is the value. So how do we access a key value pair in map? All I have to say is name in the key. Let's save it, and there you go. We have Desi programmer. We got here some error. Okay, this error is very necessary. I mean, no, that was the earlier one. Sometimes we will get an error which is interesting. I mean, if I get that error in this video, then it will be very interesting. But if we don't get that, even then I'll be telling you what can be that error and how we can solve them. Anyway, right now with just any single data, there you go how we can use it. You can even say multiple data. Let's say I'm saying name. Let's say something like roll, and let's say the roll number is 25 if we're talking about some student. Then if I save it, and here if I use the key roll, then I get the roll number, that is 25, which is pretty cool. Now this data can obviously be complex. I mean, here we have a single object. We can have the multiple objects. Let's say here I'm saying the name, which is something else. Now there it throws an error, because in JSON we don't have multiple objects. So what can we have is multiple such dictionaries. Let's say that we are creating an application where we have multiple persons. So I can say something like 1, which stands for ID 1, and it will hold the data about the person with the ID of 1. Let's say 2, it will hold data about the person with ID 2. Let's say that we just have name, which can be anything, and then we have salary, which can be some pretty decent amount, just some random numbers. We can have the same thing here too. So let's just copy, let's just paste it. Now I don't know what you guys think of it, but this data obviously ain't complex. But if you understand this basic, like how we can get this data, then everything is going to be cool with you in Flutter and JSON right today and right now onwards. Let's come here and let's try to get this data. Obviously it's going to throw an error because we don't have anything with name. But if you want to get this name, how do we do that? It's actually very simple. Here we have the my data, which will give me this thing. Now this complete thing for Dart, not for JSON, for Dart, it's a map. So what we get, we don't get this value actually, we get this thing right now. So now this is going to be a map for Dart. Now how do we get these values? Like how do we get this map? For that we will have to use this key, that is 1. So if I say something like 1, we will get a map, that's we will get this complete map. Now here if I want the name, all that I have to do is to use name again. Let's save it, and here you get John. I don't know why I said G, it should be H, but we get John. Now what if we want the salary? That's again very simple. I can say salary. Let's save it, and we get the salary. If we want the data about second person, we can save it, and here you get the salary and data about second person. I should actually have changed it. let's save. And now if I save this, yeah, I know it's not a decent salary, but that's what we have right now. Simple data in JSON. Now this data can obviously be more complex, but one other way is that what if we have an array of data? What if we have something like this, where we are saying that, okay, we just give me a minute. Now this is what we have right now. Now let's not talk about what this is for dot, but for JSON it's an array of objects. Okay, we can't have multiple objects in JSON without using an array. So now we have multiple objects in JSON, which is an array of objects in JSON. Now for different programming language, JSON is interpreted in different ways. In dot, this will be a list of maps, which means now if I want this name, what do we have to do? We have a list where this value is at index 0 by itself. Remember, now we don't have to use that one and all. Now this value is at index 0 by itself. And now if I save this, you see, you get the salary. Ain't it amazing? Like this is the basic how you have to work. And tada, we get this error. What this says is that this method was called on null. It says that this value, when they tried calling this was called on null. Now why is it so? Actually what happens here is that, let me tell you two things. This future builder is a stateful visit, and it uses asynchronous function, that's multi-threading, to get the data, which means for some time this data may not be available, which means for some time this value will give us an error. Well, what we can do in that case is very interesting. Here what all that I'm saying is that if my data is equal to null, that is if this data is null, do something else. If you get some data, then do something else. Now all that I want to say is that if you get some data, return this, which is return a center. But in certain cases, if you don't get some data, you don't ask for that. That's very simple. Don't ask for my data values if the value of my data is null. What this means is I'm saying return another center, but the only difference is that this child for this center won't ask for this data. Okay, let's just paste it, and here let's say something like, we may not be seeing this right now, that's obviously true. Even if I save this again, you see you won't see anything right here. And even if I make this file too complex, even then it's hard to see something. But if you will use this to get some data online, or if you will have a real world application already with many functions up and running, then you will see this screen with this text loading for a very few seconds. Maybe you can see if there is too much data. Anyway, this is how you get the data if this is an array of data. And let me tell you one thing now and for all. Whenever you are requesting for some JSON data from any server, or even if it's a file, all that it's going to contain is either this single object without this comma obviously, then this single object for Flutter is simply going to be a map where this is the key and this is the value. If not, then you will be getting an object with multiple objects. Then it will be like a giant map with multiple maps in for dot, or else you'll be getting an array of objects which will be a list of map for dot. And I think this is very clear, and using this you can just work with it. Let's say that I'm getting this JSON data. Let me just select, come on, select it. Let's see, sometimes things just don't work and I don't know. Okay, it's just working. Just copy this, let's just paste it. Now before you panic that hey, we have a lot of JSON data, it is looking complex, I don't know how to work with it, and let me try to format the document too. You may panic that see, we have a lot of data, how do you work with it and all, but let's just start from the beginning. Here we don't have an array of object. I'm talking with the concept of JSON. We don't have an array of object, we have a single JSON object, okay, which has a key items where we have a list of JSON object, which is an array of JSON object. Now how Dart is going to interpret this file is that it will say that we have a giant map with, where if you search for the key items, then you will get an array of another map where you can search for the key, but you will have to get the array index too. Now what that means is that if you want to get this name, all that we have to see over here is that, pay attention, all that we have to say is that first I want to talk to that chained map that we have where I get this value, which is index items. Okay, not index, it's items. Now we get this complete list. So all that I'm saying, since about the first one, my index is going to be 0, and then we get this complete map where if I want this value, then the key is going to be name. Just see the magic, everything works well. See, we have Clifford. Let me just take a look at this. Do we have an exception over here? It says string is not type of. Okay, maybe these values might be causing an error, but you can work with that later on. That's why I'm not trying to get any boolean or any these values right now, because see, this is a text widget which will ask for a string. So if you don't provide any string, it will be saying that, hey, why are you not giving us a string? And this is something you know how to deal with. So now we get the first name, Clifford. Let's try to get any, say let's try to get the name Colin. Now here, since the index is 6, for our list it's going to be 5. So all that I have to say is make this 5. Let's save it and we get Colin. Ain't it? You can get anything else. Like what if you want email? Email of Colin, it's going to be jeremy@bar.de. Very different, something I've never heard, but just save it and here you got this data. So this is how JSON works with respect to dot. I'm telling you again, the way we interpret JSON is different in different programming languages. This is the way we interpret JSON in dot, which I told you right now. And no matter now how much complex this file gets, just pay attention to the roots. Like start from the root and you will understand how you have to get these particular data here in dot, because JSON will just decode it and you will get the data. So I think that's pretty much it in this video. In the next video, I'm going to tell you a lot of things, because this future builder is actually a stateful widget and it uses asynchronous method to get some data, which causes first error, which we solved right here. But the second thing, this being a stateful widget is still problematic, because if you're trying to make changes to the state in this file, then this will be called again, causing a chain problem. If you have too much data, then your app will become slow, like resources will be consumed which are not needed actually. So we'll discuss a lot of issues in the next video. Till then, keep coding, keep loving, keep sharing, and peace.